I'm going to talk about the first time I came to Europe from Australia. The very first time I came was in 2012. I visited sort of Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin, pretty standard sort of Australian pilgrimage on the continent, I think. I visited with my then girlfriend, Nikki. And Nikki had an amazing command of languages, and I'd never really been on my own outside of Australia before, so it was really helpful having her. She'd lived there for a few years beforehand, and really showed me around all the various places. And I was pretty smitten pretty quickly. I was very into it had so much culture and history compared to Australia, which I always thought was sort of, I don't know, boring and recent, I suppose. And the arts, the music, the parties, the people living these sort of lives that I hadn't really had any experience with, really had quite a big impact on me. I didn't come from a very cultured background. I'm from country Australia, quite reasonably far out in the country Australia. I didn't have the most cultured upbringing, I suppose. My mum sort of was very well-meaning, but didn't have a lot of aspirations for me. Her main goal, objective for my upbringing was that I would be able to chop firewood and bring it inside quickly. That was basically it. All other objectives optional beyond that. You can imagine probably how much impact seeing like some of these big old cities really had, and seeing the art and culture. And I missed it before I even left. Like before I'd even gotten on the plane to come back to Australia, I was already like pining for it, I suppose. I was pining for it even more once I was back in Australia. And I remember, I think it was a couple of years later, I was sitting in traffic in Melbourne on this road called Punt Road, which is quite notorious for its terrible, terrible traffic. And I was just crawling along, and I remember thinking, like, God, this is boring. Like I felt like I was missing out on whatever was supposed to be happening in life. Like, I wasn't sure what I wanted, but I knew that this wasn't it. You know, like there was something out there over the horizon somewhere that was like exciting and interesting, and there were things going on, and they weren't happening inside my car on Punt Road, that was for sure. I was sort of worried that life was going to pass me by and like miss me by thousands of kilometers because I was down at the end of the earth. You know? So I spoke with my then girlfriend Katie, and I sort of was like, I want to move to Europe, and she was like, okay, let's do it. I wanted to move to Berlin because that's where I'd had my first real solo overseas experience. But she had heard that they spoke like German in Berlin and wasn't interested in learning German. So we decided together that we would instead move to England, and they would move to London. I ended up, I got some money from I got into a fight when I was younger, and the Victims of Crime system in Australia gave me a payout for it. And it came in at just the right time, luckily, only a couple of months after we'd made this decision. And so we finally had the funds, means, motive, opportunity to move. So we paid and packed and off we went. Before we actually moved to London, though, I wanted to recapture some of that traveling around Europe. So this was, I think, 2014 when we did this, and we sort of gallivanted around, I guess. Visited most of the places, as well as popping into Sweden quickly. Went to Malmo. We'd just come from Berlin at that point, and I didn't think much of Malmo because I thought that it was sort of a little second fiddle place, little was I to know. But we sort of traveled around and generally had a pretty good time. But then we were in Amsterdam one morning, and I looked at my bank account and I realized that all that money that I had wasn't really around anymore. And I was suddenly gripped by panic. And I realized, well, I got to get my life together. Like, we have to do something. So I applied for a bunch of jobs just online. That's on the Indeed or something or other. And we purchased tickets on a boat to England. And I was really stressed out. And I was smoking a lot, and we'd been drinking a lot for months, and was sort of generally ill at ease as we got on the boat, and it sort of dawned on me all of a sudden, I don't know anything about England, like anything. Like, I don't know anybody. I've never been to London. I haven't even looked at a picture of a map of London. I had like some authority on the idea that there was like Big Ben, and I'd listened to The Streets a bunch of times, but that was it. Like, I didn't know anything about the country that we were moving to, and didn't really have a plan of any sort. And this really freaked me out while we were on the boat on the way over. And when we finally got there, I started getting quite sick. So I think I'd bitten the inside of my mouth or something, and I'd been smoking and everything, and I got an infection just here and here, unfortunately. So we used sort of our last money to just book into an Airbnb, and I then found that I couldn't eat. I couldn't speak, and the infection grew inside my mouth quite massively. Katie was taking care of me as best she could, and I think she really did a good job. But she was also trying to look for jobs and look for places for us to live, because we couldn't just live in these new Airbnbs forever. It cost a fortune. So I decided that I would try to get some medical treatment while I was there. But every country's medical system, I think, generally seems kind of logical, at least to its locals, but not necessarily to visitors. And I found the British medical system to be Byzantine at best. And I also couldn't speak. So the infection ended up getting so bad I couldn't eat either. So eventually I just had to forego contacting the doctor after a lot of effort. And the first couple of weeks, or at least the first week, I think, when I was really sick, all I could do was basically lie in bed and feel miserable, essentially. I couldn't, like, water tasted like battery acid, and I don't think I ate for a week or something like that, and lost a bunch of weight, and generally tried to dodge the questions of our, like, increasingly nervous Airbnb hosts who were like, I haven't seen you in a few days, you better be alive in there, or this is going to be pretty bad news for us, and you. So yeah, I was like just like living in misery, basically. And Katie was really stressed out, having to basically be my carer and everything. And one morning, I remember I was reading my emails, and I got a reply from a job in London. And I was like, something about it, I guess, spurred me into action. I still couldn't talk, but I was like, I'm going to just say yes. I'm going to go to whatever this interview is. It doesn't really matter what it is. So I said yes to this interview. And I got some clothes on, and I left the house for the first time in probably a week and a half. And my face was killing me, but I finally got to this interview. And, excuse me, it was a panel interview. And when I got there, I realized, I can't talk. What's the next step of this plan to have an interview? And so all I could sort of do was gesticulate and draw stuff on the board, like the whiteboard, and I got a text-to-speech app on my phone, and I used that with, like, the robot talk. And the panel interviewers thought this was really funny, but didn't want to say anything because I was obviously in a pretty bad way. So there was a lot of them glancing at each other and, like, smirking and stuff. And by the end of it, they were just like, okay, thanks, yeah, that's enough. We'll call you, don't call us. And I left, and I remember hearing them laughing as I was leaving, and really not feeling very good about it. And making my way back to the house and sitting with Katie and just being miserable. No, I got home and I was waiting for her, actually, because she got home and she'd found us a house, a real house. And I cheered as best I could with no ability to speak. But we moved in to our new place, I think maybe a week later. And then I got a call from the company that I'd done the interview with, and they gave me the job. They said that it was the most memorable interview that they had done, and that I managed to communicate a lot without the ability to speak, and that's sort of what they were looking for for somebody in customer support, I suppose. And eventually she found a job too, and we ended up living there for a couple of years. I did recover as well, as you can probably tell. It really, I think, had quite a big impact. It showed to me how vulnerable you can be if you're like in a really unfamiliar place, even a place that seems very familiar. Like Australia and England aren't that different, ultimately. Like a lot of shared culture, but little differences can make like a really tremendous difference. And I suppose it also showed me that like taking risks, I'd been a little bit risk averse before that, but this was a huge risk and I took, and it paid off to some degree. So it sort of showed me that, you know, things can work themselves out in one way or another. Perhaps if you're very lucky, I'm not sure. Yeah, and I suppose that was it. We lived there for a few years, and eventually I grew tired of the UK. I think when I was sitting on a train and thinking there must be more to life than standing on a train like this. And then we moved to Sweden, but I think that's probably another story. Yeah.